Wilson was our only PhD president. He was probably the worst. Yeah.
Well, look, there's always going to be a class of people, the intellectual class or whatever, that lean left. Maybe that'll change. They can become more libertarian. But I mean, these guys are sort of like, this like left-wing cocoon of this. Who in the hell thinks socialism is a good idea at this point? Karl Marx and Trotskyism. They still think that. I mean, what do you do about that? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I went to the College of Charleston. One of my favorite professors actually was a guy who traveled to Cuba for the anniversary of the Communist Manifesto. I'm like, is this a cartoon character? Like, this is my poli-sci professor. Like, it's just a parody at this point. I think the idea of like liberal, professors is such a cartoon character at this point that even many students look at that and say, oh, this is just silly. There's no real answer to your question. I can't imagine convincing all these Trotskyite professors who are still stuck in their mindset not to do that. It's goofy. Yes, sir.
Rand Paul seems to have a really good relationship with Ted Cruz. How do you see that evolving over the course of the 2016 potential primary? Do you think they occupy like the same political space or really similar in the primary?
I think Ted Cruz is a great ally to this movement. I think Ted Cruz is one of the better people who won last time around. He's done a lot of great things. He's with us on so many issues. As far as occupying the same political space, we'll see. I mean, Senator Cruz has certainly made a name for himself. He got on Capitol Hill, and I enjoy watching every bit of it. So we'll see. I'm not going to try to make that political prediction. But yes, sir, Justin.
In party politics, especially within the GOP, is there validity in distancing ourselves from Dr. Paul, not his philosophy, but the namesake, just because of the tension within the party with that association?
Me, as a personal matter, Dr. Paul is one of my political heroes. I could never do that, just a matter of just how much he's changed not only my life politically, but even personally. I'm talking to you people in this room because we're on Paul. Let's face it, that's the reason we're all here. As far as messaging, I'll bring up Ron Paul's name a lot more right here than if I was speaking at a Reagan Day dinner in Iowa, because a lot of those people are antagonistic towards Dr. Paul. I think I would never do anything that would harm or anything that I personally think would be insulting towards Dr. Paul, and I have a pretty high threshold for that. I get mad a lot. Things that I think are insulting to him that others are like, that's not an insult, I think it is. Anything other than that, is smart messaging. I think you all were talking about reaching out to Santorum supporters in places. A lot of people who voted for Rick Santorum in the primaries are not necessarily diehard in line with him ideologically. They just weren't sure about Ron Paul and they didn't like Mitt Romney. Exactly. And a lot of those people would be right there with us if it was a Senator Paul or somebody else in that same position, or a Libertarian Republican. It's important to build those bridges, not to burn them. Same thing I was saying about Glenn Beck to this gentleman. Bring those people our way. They're not. And this is the neat thing about that. For all of them who agree with us on sort of the Barry Goldwater style small limited government, you can get them to start thinking about civil liberties and foreign policy because we agree on that first point. But don't beat them over the head with it. Be a cool guy. Talk to them like you would your buddy. That's how you do it. Kill them with kindness. Use Dr. Paul when you think it works, and if you think it's to a detriment of what we're trying to accomplish, then don't do that. And I think even he would agree with that. He would say it's not about him, it's about the ideas of the message. So, yes, ma'am.
The elements that were so obviously anti-Israel among Dr. Paul's supporters, do you think that's going to die down and go away, or do we still need to deal with it?
Well, it's always going to be, it's such an emotional issue for so many people, the subject of Israel. What bothered me most about all that, I don't know how many people saw the interview, I did a sit-down interview during the campaign with Dr. Paul specifically about Israel, is people were portraying him as anti-Israel. So that really bothered me, because that's not true. To say that every nation should take care of themselves and that we should trade, that's something you say about everybody. You're not selecting Israel and saying, oh, well, we shouldn't just do that with them. It was a misportrayal. As far as the outrage at dying down, look at the comments section on anything posted anywhere, left, right, progressive, liberal, conservative, libertarian. You're going to have some anti-Semitic idiots making comments. You're always going to have that. To the extent that neoconservatives or liberals want to say that like that's our movement or something like that, A, it's not true. B, you could say that about any movement. I can show you where Rachel Maddow's audience are vicious anti-Semites based on the comments page on her MSNBC blog. We need to be careful not to let our enemies portray us, that we portray ourselves in the best light. That issue in particular that's so emotional for many people is one we need to be careful about. Does that answer your question? Probably not.
Well, it's hard to predict. I mean, they're still out there. You still see them on Facebook. And I call them the bigots that they are. Because it's true what you say. They only talk about Israel. They don't talk about foreign policy or cutting off foreign aid
Right.
or all these other nations. It's just Israel. So that's telltale.
And what's so funny about that, and many of you probably know this, when they would hit Dr. Paul with that accusation, and when Israel bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor, was it 86? Am I getting the year wrong? The entire, not only Congress condemned the action, that they can't do this, but that was Reagan's Republican Party that condemned that action. I was rereading the Reagan diaries recently, and during that period, he's meeting with Israeli diplomats and ambassadors, and he has this very antagonistic attitude, like, these guys are bothering me. He did not have a favorable attitude towards them. Is Ronald Reagan an anti-Semite because he was not chummy with the diplomat as much? No, nobody could say that. But that was Reagan's Republican Party at that time condemning an action by Israel. Who was the only person that said that we should not condemn them? Ron Paul. He said they're a sovereign nation. If they felt they need to attack, that's their business. So, a lot of that information is not out there. We need to bring these things up when people put accusations on us that aren't true. So, yes, sir.
You were talking earlier about how, for Ron, you would scour the news and catch what the pulse of the nation was. So, did you happen to take away anything from what happened in Boston? And if people see that, the standing army is here, and that it's a police state, or people just, did that make them feel more patriotic that their cops were all there on time or something?
There's two things about that question. And actually, one of the best answers to that was a writer for the Jerusalem Post. It was the military affairs writer. He was in Boston when the bombing happened. And it bothered him that after the bombing happened, that they basically, de facto martial law is what happened. And the way they treated it. His problem was, as an Israeli citizen, he said, when we have these bombings in Israel, which is much more frequent, we don't shut down the entire city. You will see people in a bustling cafe next to a place that was just bombed the day prior. And part of that is you don't beat us. It's a message they send. He made the point at the end of their article, this is the Jerusalem Post writer, he said, what messages is he said, these guys are two losers from everything you know. They weren't part of some grand conspiracy. They were two idiots that got on the internet with some bad ideas, malicious intent, evil guys, in my opinion. They did something horrible. What does that say to other guys like that out there? Look at the reaction you can cause. You can shut down an entire city. That's the point the Jerusalem Post guy made. Where this becomes a messaging problem for us as libertarians, we can say it in the way I just said that. A lot of people in Boston were very happy with the police that day. They're very pro-police. So what do you do with that? I would make the points the way I just made them, that this can't be the precedent. That when a tragedy like this happens, you can't just declare martial law, or de facto martial law. If anything, it's a bad message to people in the future who might do these things. I think that's terrible. So, any more questions? Okay, well, that was a weird note to end on, but appreciate being with you guys here today. It's such a pleasure to be here with the RLC. You guys are the future for everything we're trying to do. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.